Hey, so I wanted to show you how I set up looping with only the push controller. So I'm using Live 9.1 and a push Gen 1. So let's open up Ableton and get started. Okay, so first I select my instruments. All right, so for this video, I have in mind like four basic components of like most electronic tracks. So obviously you're going to start with the drums. Right. I love 707s. Um, let's see. And you might be saying, don't you mean 808s? And no, I love the 707. It has more of a rock sound to me, and I don't know. It's kind of really in your face. I love it. I always turn down those hi hats though. Like they are just death if you leave them at their default. That's fine for now. Also like to add a little bit of this retro color plugin to pretty much everything. For drums, I go with the drum break. I'm going to dry wet at like 60%. Sure. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is select a bass instrument. I love a 303. The best sounding emulation of this I found is the Fosion plugin from the D16 group. They do a lot of great vintage Roland box emulation. Okay. We want to disable the internal sequencer here, and we want to browse for something nice. Yeah, I like that. It's kind of a nice little ravey sound. Okay. Next thing we want to do is choose some kind of pad sound. We could use, the analog or operator in Ableton, but I don't know. Let's go with the Jupiter 8 though. Pad, light wave. What's this about? It's a little quiet. Yeah, I like this. For pads, I also like to add a VHS effect for that. While I'm doing this, I really want to make sure when all these things are going that they don't really get past -12 for a couple of reasons. One, so that they don't get too loud in the video, but also that when you eventually master this track, whether you do it yourself and run it through Isotope Ozone or something, or you send it out, you want to give the engineer some headroom to work with. So when they actually feed it through a compressor or limiter, it's going to sound good and not mushy. Okay, so we got pads, bass, drums. Now we've got our lead sound. Go back to the Jupiter for this. Bad memory, lots of those. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. So, okay, the next thing is we're going to want to high pass everything that's not the kick and the bass drum. Or kick and the bass, not the bass drum, kick drum and bass. Pretty much everything that's not that in any track I'm working on, it's going to get a 100 hertz high pass filter at a minimum. Sometimes more, like a more aggressive high pass than 100 hertz. But like everything, most of my vocals, because all that stuff underneath 100 hertz is pretty much junk when you feed it into a compressor. It's going to kind of screw up the envelope estimation. It's not going to sound good. Basically, in your track, to make it sound good, you're trying to carve out specific frequency regions for your sounds to shine through. You don't really, mixing is complicated, but basically it's like, if it sounds good in isolation, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sound good together with the mix, because you're going to have areas of buildup, or sometimes, and particularly in lower frequencies, you might have destructive interference. But before I digress too much on this, high pass, all that stuff, the other thing you definitely want to do before you play with probably any MIDI controller, but definitely with the Push Gen 1, is you're going to want to restrict the velocity. You can technically do this on the Push, but I just find this a little bit easier to work with. So you don't have to slam down on the pads to get the same effect. So I'm just making it so there's pretty much no velocity information. I am no Chopin when it comes to the controller usage. This is confusing as hell, so I'm going to call this lead and move my notes out of the way. You can get fancy and give stuff real names, but too lazy right now. And usually. Okay. It's going to be way too loud in a mix. Just go an octave up and octave down on the Push. Very loud. Okay, so we'll revisit the levels as we go on. All right, so let's get started. I select the track. All of my tracks should be set to auto monitor by default, and you'll notice that this one is armed, the drum track. And when I go left and right, you'll basically see that the arm selection should move as you move the track. Okay, so there's this 4x4 grid here, but it can get pretty overwhelming to try to finger drum out something complicated. So usually what I'll do is I'll just hit record and I'll let it run for a couple bars. I'll see that red is highlighted there. Okay. So we've got this one. Now I haven't done anything. Like, I've just let it run for 2 bars. I've hit record again. I've got 2 empty bars, but notice that I've got a step sequencer running through what is selected to be 16 notes. You can't see it on the camera right now, but the 16th note quantization is selected. So I'll select my kick and I'll be super basic, and I'll just put it on every quarter note. I'll give a basic rock beat for this, and maybe we'll jazz it up a little bit for the hi-hats. Right, this is like a very, very stiff sounding rhythm, so we want to add some groove to it. So I'll go back to the mouse for this. I'll select Packs, Core Library, Swing and Groove, and I'll go to the MPC. Because we've quantized to 16th notes, we want to select one of the 16 presets. So I like this MPC 16 Swing 53. Oh no. Okay. Let's not get too crazy over this. Let's move on to the bass. I'm gonna raise the volume a bit. Maybe let's add a little bit of compression on this. 2, 3, 4. Alright, so I've selected clip on the push, and I want to chop down that length a little bit. I hit the quantize button. Great, now let's move on to another track. This is probably so loud in the master bus right now. Just for safety reasons. Let's add a limiter onto the master bus. What's going on here? If we didn't start on the 1, James Brown would not be happy. One, two, three, four. One, two, three, four. Alright, so notice that to stop that, I basically just hit the record button and start looping again. Okay, so now I'm moving on to my lead sound. I am not a keyboard player at all, so let's see how this goes. Alright, so let's say this is my one idea, and I duplicated it. I select this. Let's say I want to change the pad and the lead sound to keep the bass the same, which is not something I would do in a song, but for illustrative purposes, this is what we're doing. Alright, so now I've got like a couple different ideas, so I can use the arrow keys to select the different scenes. That's a row of clips. Alright, so there you have it. There's a basic session with the push, and you could do a lot more, selection of, spend a lot more time selecting your instruments and effects chains and all that sort of thing. And in the push, you can certainly do a lot more with automation and controlling effects and that sort of thing. But this is just a basic idea to selecting your tracks, playing phrases, recording them, and switching between scenes. I just would say as a final parting note that a lot of folks, when they get the push, they say, "Oh, I'm never using the mouse again. I never want to, have to type stuff out on the keyboard." And I would just say that, it's kind of a lost cause to try to use the push for everything. Certainly with the push Gen 2, you can do a lot more, particularly with the sampler. But, learn what you're comfortable with on the push, apply it as much as you can, and don't be afraid to go back to using the mouse, especially when it comes to editing and arranging. Definitely there are some huge benefits, and it will maybe allow you to just free up your compositions a little bit more. But certainly the push is it's incredibly fun. Like, even if you're not like making a track for your serious personal music or whatever, if you just want to have fun making sound, there's really nothing else like it for me. I love my push. So hope you got something out of this, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.